Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. So we're going to call today's meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee to order. As per the current COVID regulations, there's just myself, Deputy Clerk Joel, and Kathy in council chambers, and we're all distanced, and the rest of the committee and applicants are joining us remotely. So at this time, I would be looking for an adoption of the agenda. Moved by Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Seymour Fagan. All in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried. So at this time, I'll just introduce committee. So with us for the committee today, we have Mayor Andy Letham, Deputy Mayor Patrick O'Reilly, Councillor Kathleen Seymour Fagan, Mike Barkwell, and myself, Andrew Vail, as chair. And with staff, we have planners Ian Walker, David Harding, Mark LaHaye, from engineering, Christina Sissons, and our director of planning, Chris Marshall, on the line. So at this point, we'll move into our public meeting. So as required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on these applications. Any recommendations made today will go to the February 23rd council meeting. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicants, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to provide their name for the public record. In interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called, please turn on your video and turn off your mute and state your name. So at this point, we're going to move into 3.1 on the agenda. And I think that's Ian Walker.
Good afternoon, committee members. Through you, Mr. Chair. This application is it's 3 applications, an official plan amendment for the property, the eastern half of the identified site, a zoning bylaw amendment for the entire 2 properties put together, and a draft plan of subdivision for the 2 properties put together. These applications are based at the original property is 331 Logie Street, which is the one shown there where it says subject land on the presentation. There is another second property to the east of that was part of the Bromont Home subdivision that created Deacon Crescent, McGuire, and Logan Lane there. This was one of the blocks that was left over. You can see another block just to the north of it, to the right of where it says unopened on there. That's the former Logie Street alignment, which runs through this property. So the former Logie Street property, the lands were deemed surplus and sold to the properties on either side and consolidated with them through there. There is an easement that Enbridge holds through there because the Enbridge pipeline runs along the former roadway. So these 3 applications together would facilitate the development shown on the next slide. Joel, sorry. First of all, show you the next slide is the air photo of the area. You can see the former Logie Street right-of-way running through there between the 331 Logie Street and the eastern block. Just as a little bit of background here, these applications were circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. So all the landowners within 120 meters of both properties were circulated the notice. The sign was posted on the property identifying this public meeting. And we have received a number of comments from the public, mostly people on Deacon Crescent and I think it's McGuire Crescent there. We've also, since writing the report, received comments from engineering and corporate assets. A copy has been provided to the committee members, identifying a few issues that still need to be sorted out and resolved. Engineering and corporate assets has recommended a meeting with the applicant to discuss those issues. They're basically all technical in nature type of issues relating to traffic, the traffic study, some of the background studies, stormwater management, etc., and servicing for the property. We've also received comments from Curve Lake First Nation, which have been provided to the applicant, and a copy has also been provided to yourself. The one thing I'll just point out here, if you want to move to the next slide, Joel, the development is proposed to encompass both of these properties. So what will happen here is the draft plan of subdivision will create the entire thing as one block in a plan of subdivision. The reason for that is that then each of the individual townhouses, once constructed, can be sold through part lot control, which is a provision in the Planning Act that allows them to sell each of them individually without the need for separate consent applications for each individual property. So instead of doing 45 consent applications where they have to go through that process 45 times, they can do it through part lot control, which is much quicker, easier, and it's an application that comes directly to council at a later stage once everything is built. The other nice part about that is that once the townhouses are constructed, they would then go out and actually survey all of the foundations, and the part lot control would be based on where everything's actually built, as opposed to trying to do consents and then build everything on multiple properties. So it's a simpler process, and still allows them to sell those. So they would be freehold townhomes, but they would be built on a private condo road. If you want to just move to the next slide, Joel. And this is the front of conceptual front of what these would look like. The applicants have provided an urban design brief, and what they've done in looking at this development is tried to propose townhomes that are similar in keeping with the ones that are on McGuire and Deacon Crescents to the east. So trying to fit in with the same type of build as the neighborhood that's already there. If you want to just go back 2 slides, please, Joel. So in looking here at the air photo, you'll note there's the 2 blue blocks there, the one with the rounded curve along Logie Street being the right-hand property. That's currently city-owned. The city has deemed that surplus to their needs. Council has, I believe, it's been through a council process where it's been deemed surplus to the city's needs. There is also a block to the north of that, which is being retained by the city as part of the Logie Street Park, the redevelopment that was just done there on the property identified as 325 Logie Street. And so that portion of the park remains with the city. This is deemed surplus. I will just note that in 2015, the council of the day had endorsed the LINDSAY secondary plan, which of course was subject to appeal to the LPAT, the OMB at the time, and now LPAT. And at that time, in endorsing the LINDSAY secondary plan, this property here that's currently subject to the official plan amendment was identified as being residential in the LINDSAY secondary plan. It was then again adopted by council in 2017, more as a formality, as part of that appeal process. And so therefore, if the LINDSAY secondary plan were not currently subject to appeal, those lands would have already been designated residential. We'd be dealing then with just a zoning bylaw amendment and a draft plan of subdivision. So the official plan amendment only applies to the eastern portion of the property currently owned by the city. As I'd noted, since writing the report, we'd received several comments from the public. Copies of those have all been included in your agenda packages for today. And the issues, I think, are pretty much the same for all of the comments. Concerns in terms of environmental impacts, concerns in terms of traffic, and concerns, I guess, in terms of the city surplusing and selling the eastern portion of the lands there to the applicant for this development. So at this time, staff are respectfully continuing to recommend that these applications will be referred back to staff to allow further processing and review in accordance with what we typically would do here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Does the committee have any questions of staff at this time? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Ian. I know these reports are coming back and it'll answer a lot of the questions because we're just at the public meeting stage, but is there any sense, I don't know whether Director Marshall would know, any challenges around capacity in the sewer system for this? And I guess, is there any challenges with the easement? That's the only two questions I have at this point.
So it may be a benefit as well for us to hear from the applicant, but I'll provide a very quick response. In terms of the easement, I am aware they've designed their proposal such that the easement remains untouched. Similar as to any other easement you would have in any other area, there will be no buildings on top of that. That will not constitute any of the lands that are sold, so they will be kept in the common condominium ownership. And again, it's Enbridge that would have the easement through there. So if there were any works that ever needed to be done on that line, Enbridge would have the right to go in and do those works there. So that's for the easement. In terms of servicing, just of note, the planning report notes it in 2011, when the city undertook our first growth management strategy, the owner of the property at 331 Logie Street at that time had identified that they were looking for 12 units of residential for the 331 Logie Street property. I believe they were probably anticipating single detached dwellings on that property. So of course, this is an intensification. This is the 331 Logie Street is in the intensification area under the growth management strategy. The eastern property is actually within the Greenfield area. So there's a split. That's really more of a technical issue. And the applicant has in their planning justification report spoke to the densities on both halves of the development. So they've divided it in that sense to address both components in terms of provincial policy and the growth plan policy. But really at this point, the servicing issue is one of the things that's being looked into. Engineering and corporate assets has identified that we need confirmation through the submission of their functional servicing report. Their engineer will need to confirm that there is actually adequate pipe sizes to get to the property, adequate servicing for it, adequate capacity at the plant. And so there will be some technical discussion behind this, certainly behind the scenes, in which engineering has suggested that we have a meeting with the proponent and their team to discuss the issues and make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what allocation is there potentially there. So.
Thank you.
Is there any other further questions? Mayor Latham?
Thank you. Ian, can you, thank you for that. Can you confirm, I know that the Logie-Lindsay Street intersection, I've heard conversation about a street light being put in there. I'm seeing some comments that it's not till 2025. My understanding is, I thought it was in the budget for this year, but can you just confirm, or do you know at this point what the timeline is for a street light there regardless?
Okay, so I can't confirm that, but I do know in some of the comments from engineering and corporate assets, they noted that they're currently, I think, in the design phase for some of the works that will occur there. It's a question that I'll have to defer to engineering and corporate assets to probably speak about the timeline for that. Christina Sisson is here as part of the meeting. So I will leave that to Christina to speak to.
Okay, so I know that there's a streetlight plan for there, regardless of this development or not. I just wanted to, make sure the public knows that they're working on a design, whether it's this year or next year. That need has already been triggered to keep that intersection there a little bit safer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions of staff at this time? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
I think Christine had a comment on the intersection light there, I think, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Christina.
Just through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed. We have confirmed with our technical services that the design is underway for that intersection, and the intent is to have that intersection properly signalized this year. That is certainly the intention and the forecast, as Mayor Letham did mention. As well, we have assured that the current consultant working on that design has the traffic report that's been prepared for this particular site.
Great, thanks, Christina. Is there any further questions at this time? Seeing none, does the applicant, owner, or agent on behalf of the applicant and owner wish to speak to this application?
We have Christine on the line.
Yes. Hello. Hi. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. Hello. There we are. So we have prepared a presentation for you this afternoon. Ian's presentation was quite thorough. We are happy to present it if you'd like to see it, and if you're satisfied, we don't need to. So we will leave it to you if you'd like to see the presentation.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. So good afternoon, members of committee, staff, and members of the public. My name is Christine Hallis. I'm with KLM Planning Partners Incorporated, and we represent LEFA Properties with respect to the applications before you this afternoon. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So as Ian noted, the lands are located just east of Lindsay Street South along Logie Street. They are flanked by Logie Park and Scugog River to the north. The proposal makes use of two irregularly shaped parcels and the former Logie Street right-of-way, which is shown by the yellow dashed line. As Ian noted once again, Logie Street was of course realigned when the subdivision to the east was developed. So the easterly parcel then, which is currently occupied by a large sodded berm, was a remnant parcel of the subdivision to the east and was declared surplus by the city in 2019. Move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the existing policy context in the Town of Lindsay official plan, which is currently in force and effect, is that the westerly portion of the site, or the western parcel, is designated residential, while the easterly portion is designated parks and open space. In 2017, the City of Kawartha Lakes Council adopted the Lindsay secondary plan, which would replace the Town of Lindsay official plan, and this redesignated the eastern parcel from parks and open space to residential. Now, this secondary plan was appealed and remains under appeal for reasons not related to this site. And in the interest of the timely processing of these applications, because we don't know when the appeals will be resolved, we've applied for an official plan amendment. Thank you very much. So the proposal before you consists of 45 multiple attached or townhouse dwellings. They are proposed in a condominium tenure. There will be two private roads with one main connection to Logie Street, a stormwater management block to deal with stormwater runoff, and a water meter room to house infrastructure related to water servicing. There will also be 12 visitor parking spaces at a rate of 0.25 spaces per dwelling unit, which is consistent with the zoning bylaw. Thank you very much. So this is the proposed draft plan of subdivision. As Ian noted again, it just forms a development block for the future conveyance of the parcels of tied land, which we can refer to as lots. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So again, looking at the official plan, as mentioned, this would redesignate the eastern parcel from parks and open space to residential. We can move on to the next slide here. And this is the council approved secondary plan under official plan amendment 16, which shows you the residential designation. Thank you. So the zoning bylaw amendment file proposes to rezone all of the lands to a site-specific residential multiple one zone with specific requirements for the categories shown on the screen. We can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. And here you have the conceptual site plan with a little bit of color, makes it a little bit easier to see. The residential blocks or townhouses are shown in yellow. The 2 parking spaces per unit are in the darker blue. You've got your visitor parking in the red shade, your private roads in the blue, the lighter blue, and your stormwater management facility or pond at the south end along Logie Street in purple. As you can see, the siting of the blocks makes efficient use of the irregularly shaped parcels. The siting of the stormwater management pond as well maintains some open space along Logie Street and serves a critical function of collecting the stormwater from the site to make sure that there are no environmental adverse impacts. The proposed density is 30, oh, if we could just go back for a quick moment, thank you. So the proposed density is 30.8 dwelling units per hectare, which under the Lindsay official plan is considered medium density. And this is consistent with the policies in the official plan, which direct medium density developments to be located along collector and arterial roads. So you're on a collector on Logie Street and in proximity to Lindsay Street, which is an arterial road. The site plan application has not been filed yet, so that we can take all of your initial comments, comments from the public and commenting agencies, and incorporate those into a revised final site plan to be submitted formally. We can move ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So you've seen these in Ian's slides. You'll see it's a typical two-story townhouse facade with a mixture of stone, brick, and vinyl siding. And again, these will be refined and submitted and worked through with staff through the site plan application process. Move to the next slide, so your flankage elevations. And the next slide, please. So finally, there were a number of supporting studies completed in support of the proposed development, as you can see on the screen. I will note that of particular importance and in response to a number of the comments received from the public in terms of environmental concerns, there was an environmental impact study completed, as well as a hydrogeological report to make sure that there were no adverse environmental effects associated with the development, and that the Scugog River remained in a naturalized and unaffected state. So I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thanks, Christine. Does committee have any questions of the applicant? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thanks very much for that very colorful presentation. Just more of a curiosity, the size of your townhouses, what size approximately are they?
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, the minimum lot size for the parcels of tied land would be 160 square meters. That is what's currently proposed in the zoning bylaw. Some of them might be a little bit larger, but that's the minimum.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, does anybody else from the public wish to speak to this application?
The only other person we had was Ryan, which I believe is Christine's colleague, and unless he'd like to speak, no other had registered or are online.
All right. Anybody else wish to speak to this application? Calling for a third final time. Anybody else interested in speaking to this application? All right. Seeing none. Committee, there's a recommendation before you. What are your wishes? Mayor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give you the motion arising from the, I'll give you the motion as printed, that it be referred back to staff to follow up on any issues, and through the public consultation, all the comments are received, and that come back at that point.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to 3.2. David, you're up.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, committee. So this application is for the property addressed as 151 Penile Road in the geographic township of Mariposa. The owners are Ronald and Linda Hamilton. Notice of the application was provided in accordance with the Planning Act. All property owners within 500 meters of the subject lands were provided notice of the application, and a sign was posted on the property by the city sign company. Next slide, please. So the subject property is an agricultural lot and is surrounded by agricultural operations on all sides, as well as a forest and wetland body to the north and northwest. The application will fulfill a condition of provisional consent file DO3 2019-034 to sever an approximately 0.5 hectare rural residential lot containing the existing farmhouse and retain the balance of the agricultural lands to be consolidated with the farming operations other farm lands. Next slide, please, very briefly. So we'll see, thank you very much. So the farmhouse itself is very close to Penile Road, and there is a farm implement building kind of behind the farmhouse, which is proposed to be severed with the house. And there are some other agricultural buildings that the committee would have seen on the previous photograph, kind of to the northwest of where the severance is taking place. So those buildings will be removed. So the zoning bylaw amendment proposed, if we can go back to the previous slide, please, is to have the agricultural cultivated lands to be zoned agricultural exception 32 to prohibit residential use on those lands. And then the residence and the implement shed would be zoned rural residential type 1 exception 11 to recognize the residential use of that lot to be severed, and also to bump up the accessory building lot coverage a little bit in order to allow that implement shed to be severed with the house. It is staff's opinion that this slight increase to lot coverage for accessory buildings is appropriate considering the size of the residential lot to be created and the placement of that building behind the house. The application is consistent with the 2019 growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the 2020 provincial policy statement, and also conforms with the city's official plan. All of these documents specify the protection of agricultural land when the consolidation of farming operations is occurring. And staff is of the opinion that this proposal represents good planning. So staff does respectfully recommend that the committee consider referring the zoning bylaw amendment application to council for approval. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Does committee have any questions of staff? Seeing none, does the owner or applicant or agent on behalf of the applicant wish to speak to the application?
We believe we have the owner online, Linda Hamilton, but we have been unable to hear from her today due to technical issues. So I don't know, Linda, can you say hello again? Looks like she's trying, but unfortunately we can't hear anything.
All right, it looks like Linda's trying to communicate, but nothing's coming through. Committee, there's a recommendation in front of you. What are your wishes? Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. Pretty straightforward. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak to this application? Anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this application? Third and final time, anybody from the public who would wish to speak to this application? All right, seeing none, committee. Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Mr. Chair. I move that the report be received and that the zoning bylaw amendment be approved and adopted by council.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to 3.3. Planner Mark LaHaye.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of committee. Notice of this application for a zoning bylaw amendment was given to each assessed landowner within 500 meters and all applicable agencies and departments. A sign was also posted on the property in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. The subject property, as shown on the key map, is located within a prime agricultural area east of the town of Lindsay and northwest of Downeyville, and is located on the north side of Pigeon Lake Road in the geographic township of Emily. The owner has applied to rezone a portion of the property from the agricultural zone to an agricultural exception zone to permit a woodworking shop as an additional use and establish applicable development standards, including a reduction in the parking requirements, along with an increase in lot coverage for the accessory building, and also recognize non-applicable provisions that are related to setbacks between two or more zones. The effect of the amendment is to rezone a portion of the property to facilitate the creation of a custom woodworking shop as a secondary use to manufacture custom kitchen cabinets and furniture with a total floor area of approximately 600 square meters, which would be inclusive of office and storage space. Next slide, please. Various documents and plans were submitted by the applicant in support of the proposed amendment, including an agricultural impact assessment indicating that agricultural land impacts are minimized, as well as having no negative impact on compatibility, and no MDS calculations, MDS calculations were also provided in relation to existing barns within the review area, which concluded that MDS setbacks are met. Next slide, please. Further evaluation of this agricultural assessment is ongoing. The application is being further evaluated for determining conformity to the policies of the 2019 growth plan and the policies of the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan, as well as consistency with the provincial policy statement, including the guidelines on permitted uses in Ontario's prime agricultural areas, which specify that on-farm diversified uses are to be located on a farm and minimize the amount of land removed from agricultural production, be compatible with the rural character of the neighborhood, and remain secondary in nature to the on-site agricultural operation. The background information which has been submitted in support of the application has been circulated to the appropriate agencies and city departments for review and comment. At this time, comments have not been received from all the circulated agencies and city departments, including the Kawartha Conservation and agricultural related comments from economic development. In consideration of the comments and analysis that are contained in the report, staff respectfully recommend that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application be referred back to staff for further review and processing until such time as comments have been received from all circulated agencies and city departments and that any comments and concerns have been addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Does committee have any questions of staff at this point? Mayor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that, Mark. Good report, actually. I'm fine with referring it back to staff. I'm just curious. I mean, is there any big flags here jumping out at you initially? It seems pretty straightforward to me. I know it's probably just a timing thing that you want to have those comments back and make sure everything is as it should be. So is there anything jumping out at you at this point? I'm expecting that once you get the comments, this would be a fairly quick turnaround. Am I Am I reaching, or maybe you can comment on that?
That's correct, through the chair. I mean, the comments that we're anticipating from Kawartha Conservation and our Agricultural Development Officer, we feel will align with this particular proposal. With respect to supporting it, it's just that we haven't received the confirmation that we require, and we will also need some time to just refine the zoning bylaw to make sure that it captures what is required. The applicant has also just recently provided some additional information that the building division was asking for regarding exposed building face, and we will need to pass that along to our building division for their review and comment as well.
Okay, thanks for the clarity. Appreciate that.
Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thank you. Just along the lines of Mayor Latham, it looks like it's fairly straightforward, and it seems like it meets the OMAFR guidelines as well too. So I think with all that, we just look forward to it coming back fairly soon. Thank you.
Any further questions at this point? Seeing none, does the owner or applicant or agent on behalf of the owner applicant wish to speak to the application?
We have the applicant Emma Drake on the line.
Go ahead, Emma.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and thank you to Mark for the report. As mentioned, my name is Emma Drake, and I am applicant on behalf of the owner, David Harding. I just wanted to pass along a couple of really quick points in addition to Mark's report. First, I just wanted to emphasize that this application is for an on-farm diversified use, which is promoted by the province. And as Mark alluded to in his report, it does meet those 5 key criteria. So it is located on a farm. It will be secondary to the farm use. The overall area is limited, so it's less than the 2% permitted by the province. It is technically classified as a home industry, which the province recognizes specifically as non-farm diversified use. And as we provided in the agricultural impact assessment, it is considered compatible with the agricultural character of the area and won't negatively impact surrounding agricultural operations. I also just wanted to mention there were a couple of comments in the report regarding natural heritage features and the comments outstanding from KRCA. This proposed development is greater than 30 meters from any of the mapped environmental features on the property, and no environmental studies have been required, and KRCA did not request any of those studies during the pre-consultation process. With regard to the zoning bylaw amendment itself, I did just want to make the committee aware that this property is actually already zoned for a butcher shop, which has never been established on the property. So we're proposing to amend the site-specific zoning for the butcher shop to permit the woodworking shop as an alternative. As well, the zoning bylaw amendment would recognize a slight reduction in parking for the facility and increased coverage for the building. So overall, it's our opinion that this application is consistent with the PPS and conforms to the growth plan and official plan, and otherwise represents good planning. We do recognize that there are certain comments outstanding, so we would respectfully request, as the committee has mentioned, that this be brought back as soon as possible once those comments are received. So that concludes my comments. If there are any questions, I am available to answer them, and we do have the owner, David Gingrich, on the line as well.
Thanks, Emma. Mayor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Emma. You said David Gingrich, the owner. At the beginning, you said David Harding.
Oh.
If David Harding is the owner, then I have a few tougher questions, but I thought we better just get on the record and clarify that David Gingrich is the owner, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Emma at this time? Okay, seeing none. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak to this application?
Unless Mr. Gingrich, who's on the line, would like to speak to his application. No other people have registered.
Okay, Mr. Gingrich, was there anything you wanted to add to the presentation?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay,
Yes, so through the chair, I would like to thank Emma Drake for her presentation. Assume that I am the only faceless participant in the meeting. I guess you'll all just have to. So as far as the application, I don't anything to add really. Emma was very thorough, and it's been an interesting way to. I look forward to hearing from all of you.
thanks, Mr. Gingrich. Okay, committee, you have a recommendation in front of you. What are your wishes? Mayor Latham?
I'll give you the motion as printed that it be referred back to staff and brought back as soon as possible, please.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Seymour Fagan, any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. At this point, I think this concludes our public portion of the meeting under the Planning Act. So we'll now move down to 4.0 deputations, which there are none, and 5.0 correspondence, which there is none, which brings us to our reports. 6.1, an application to amend the Village of Bobcaygeon zoning bylaw 16-78, together with a draft plan of condominium at 7-27 Lakewood Crescent, Port 32 Incorporated. Mark LaHaye.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Notice of this application was originally given for the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of condominium to each landowner within 120 meters in all applicable agencies and departments, and a sign was posted in accordance with the Planning Act. The subject property is located on the south side of Lakewood Crescent, south of a single detached residential subdivision, and is on the west side of Austin Boulevard and on the north side of River Park Drive. The proposal is to permit a residential condominium plan consisting of 48 townhouse units fronting on a private condominium road, which is accessed from Lakewood Crescent. Next slide, please. The proposed units will be developed on full municipal services. There will be no regular access from Austin Boulevard, only emergency access via a gate. An amendment to the Village of Bobcaygeon zoning bylaw is necessary to permit the residential use, together with site-specific zone provisions, along with a draft plan of condominium. Next slide, please. As the subject land is zoned general industrial, the applicant has submitted a zoning bylaw amendment application for consideration, which proposes to rezone to an urban residential type 4, in this case type 4 exception 11 zone, to permit the medium density residential townhouse dwelling units with site specific provisions relating to minimum lot area, front, rear, interior and exterior side yard setback, and maximum lot coverage on the subject lands. A number of plans and reports have been prepared by various consultants, which were received in support of the proposed amendment and draft plan of condominium. All of these reports and plans that were submitted have been circulated to the applicable agencies and city departments for review and comment. Staff has reviewed the documentation that was prepared and filed in support of these applications and accepts the planning rationale that's been provided in the context of the relevant provincial and City of Kawartha Lakes policies and plans. Since the writing of this report, a call has been received from Mr. Hartigan, and comments were received from Ms. Secor with respect to reiterating traffic concerns and concerns regarding drainage and stormwater management, respectively. The engineering department and the KRCA will be providing detailed comments on the stormwater management during the site plan review. Also, engineering has advised at this point that a stop sign was not yet warranted at the intersection of Mill Street and Lakewood Crescent, and a traffic light was not yet warranted at the intersection of Mill Street and CKL Road 36. It is our understanding that any required road improvements and capital works are evaluated by both engineering and public works, and the city's 5-year roads plan is to be reevaluated in 2022. Engineering may have some further comments in this regard. Through discussions with the applicant, which we've had recently, in order to support a variety of deck sizes and options, there has been a request made to increase the maximum lot coverage that's indicated in the Appendix E of the bylaw from 40% to 47%. This request has been reviewed internally with staff from planning and engineering and is acceptable provided the next stormwater management report and design addresses the proposal, which the applicant advised will be done. We will also obtain confirmation from KRCA on the increased coverage through the site plan comments for this project. In addition, to accommodate the above, staff is also recommending revising the bylaw to distinguish setbacks between the main building and the decks to essentially establish that the minimum front and rear yard building setbacks will be 6 meters and 5 meters respectively, with a separate provision allowing a 3-meter encroachment into those setbacks for decks, with an exception or an exemption rather for stairs. The owner applicant is agreeable to this approach, and the proposed zoning bylaw that's contained in the report in Appendix E could be modified in this regard prior to going to council for approval. The applications for zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of condominium would conform to the growth plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement and would conform to the applicable policies of the official plan. In consideration of the comments and the evaluation that's contained within this report, provided there are no further issues or concerns raised, staff respectfully recommends that the proposed application for the zoning bylaw amendment as amended and the draft plan of condominium be referred to council for approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Does committee have any questions of Mark at this point? Mayor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe a couple of questions. Mark, I know you're saying it's not, and you know what, this is a great report, and this is a good example of, a tight development and staff doing a great job at working with the developer and, taking the comments and coming up with a plan. So my compliments for that. I think it's good. My only concern, and it's pretty minor, is I'm wondering why wouldn't we consider a stop sign at Lakewood and Mill Street? And maybe Kathleen can weigh on, or Councillor Seymour Fagan knows that area better than me, but I understand that, from a traffic perspective, it might not be warranted, but we are adding, 48 residences and probably more than that number of vehicles to this area. And what would be the downside to doing that? And can this committee ask that be done? And would it be added to the draft plan, the conditions of the draft plan, or am I stepping totally outside of our bounds? And I wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts, and then maybe if Councillor Seymour Fagan has a comment, she probably knows the area better than I do. It just seems to me this would be the time to do it, and it would allay a lot of concerns, and just, if nothing else, keep that corner a little bit safer. But that's just my comment. Thanks, Mark.
In terms of that, Christina from engineering may have some additional comments to provide with respect to stop sign requests. That's something that we can certainly look at if necessary, if there's a need for a revision to the plan to accommodate or a condition.
Well, I understand probably part of the traffic study, came back as it's not warranted, and I get all that. I guess I'm just, is there a mechanism my first question, is there a mechanism for this committee to add that condition to this approval? Or should that be done totally separately? And then I wouldn't mind if Councillor Seymour Fagan has a comment on just, is there no need for that whatsoever here? Or is it, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it all at once, I guess is my comment. So I'll leave it with you guys.
Go ahead, Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Thank you, through you. So that area, there's a lot of people walking their animals around there. They have complained about excess speed as well. So, I don't think that it would be a bad thing to put a stop sign, especially if we already have concerns. And that is prior to even developing this piece of property. Now, I'm just wondering, the stop sign issue, that's not going to hold anything up. We just require that a stop sign be put in. Is that correct?
Well, I guess that's my question. I'm just, if this committee will contemplate it, what's the process? Can we make that part of this approval, or is that a whole separate? Richard's got his hand up, so I'm just looking for.
Richard, go ahead.
If we choose to go that route, how would we put that in place? Thanks.
Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to the mayor. I guess there's a couple of different comments here. Is if this development would trigger any off-site work, such as either turning lanes or stop signs, then it would be appropriate to put that in as a condition of draft plan approval. I know when I dealt with the small development that was that's on Austin Boulevard there. There were comments back then, and that was probably about eight or so years ago, about traffic on here. I think there's a couple of different issues. I think there's an operational issue, one to Councillor Seymour Fagan's comments about speeding, and I think there's a safety issue that's been brought up by the community as a whole. I think perhaps though that if the traffic study didn't trigger that on its own, I think perhaps it's more of an operational consideration, and it's something then that that you could look at and perhaps have the engineering department sort of look into if it's not something that was specifically warranted by this development application. Thank you.
So just for clarification, Richard, so basically what you're saying then is it should be a follow-up motion to engineering to trigger the stop sign? Is that what you're saying?
That would be my recommendation, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the application? All right, you've got a motion in front of you. What is committee's wishes?
Actually, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Yeah, through you to the planner. So because my internet is not working here and I can't pull up the plan, you mentioned something that the developer was looking for but wasn't in this this application. Now, what was that? It was towards the end that you were saying that.
Yes. Recently, we've had a request and discussions with the developer with respect to different potential deck options that could be provided to future homeowners in that particular development. And so as we were looking at the plans and working through the numbers, it was determined that we needed to look at increasing the lot coverage to accommodate these potential decks, as well as looking at differentiating the setbacks between the main buildings and the decks themselves in terms of how much the decks would be permitted to encroach into those minimum setbacks. So that's why we were, basically describing this particular request that would then be accommodated in the proposed zoning bylaw that would be then going to council for approval.
Okay, so does it need to be added as a follow-up, or is it in here? Because I can't see it. I can't see anything right now.
Yeah, so I mean, the bylaw itself as originally proposed was part of the schedule to the report. So the only difference that we would be making would be increasing the lot coverage from 40 to 47%, and then establishing that what the minimum front and rear yard setbacks would be for the buildings themselves, while allowing a 3-meter encroachment into those minimum front and rear yard setbacks for the decks with an exemption for the stairs. So those are the changes that would be made to the proposed bylaw that would be moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Latham?
Don't sound so excited when you say that, Chair. Thank you. So I hear what you're saying, Richard, but you know what? I'm gonna propose that we amend the draft plan approval to include a stop sign at the corner of Lakewood and Mill. I mean, I know the traffic study hasn't generated maybe the need, but I still think it's the right thing to do as a result of this development. So if the committee will make the recommendation, that I'll move that we amend the draft plan approval to include a stop sign, very minimal cost, Mill Street and Lakewood, as part of the draft plan, and that the motion, I'll give you the motion as printed, obviously the second.
No.
Sorry. Let me finish. I'll give you the second that obviously the draft plan of condominium substantially in the form attached as Appendix D as amended, and then the rest of it be referred to council for approval. But I think we should include it as part of, it's a minimal cost, but we'll see what committee wants to do if somebody wants to second that.
Okay, so motion from Mayor Latham. Do you want to second that, Councillor Seymour Fagan? Okay.
With the follow-up.
And then discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Seymour Fagan.
I just think it would be easier now to adjust it from a 40% lot coverage to a 47% lot coverage instead of it coming back again. Because staff has discussed this, they have a plan for it. It's just not in what we have in front of us. So I would like to have that amended as well.
Okay, I think just talking to Joel, that's part of the amendment. So I think you're covered, Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Perfect. Yeah, because I can't see it, like I said.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? If there's none, all in favor? Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
No, it's just brief, just to follow up. I will support the motion, but I think you should remind, with all due respect, remind the mayor that we should just stick to planning issues and leave stop signs out of our planning meetings.
I'll leave that to the two of you. Calling the question, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so that brings us down to 6.2, assumption of Churchdown Mews subdivision, LINDSAY. Christina Sisson.
Good afternoon, committee. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. I'm here today to present to you the assumption bylaw for consideration for Churchdown Mews subdivision. It is the fourth and final phase of our Churchdown development on the east side of LINDSAY, east of Logie Street. The stormwater management pond is a component of all four phases and is located on what was the former Parkside Drive road allowance that the developer at the time, Mr. Roger Cunnington, purchased. And we have had not only a pond built that worked as a temporary facility, but also that pond has basically been rebuilt and is now ready for assumption by the municipality as it serves the function of water quality control for the four phases of development. The three roads that are under this particular phase of the development are Holton Street, Milner Court, and Moynes Court. We are also assuming a walkway block which connects the court to Parkside Drive. There is connectivity in terms of the walkways and the sidewalks at this time, And this rounds out, as I said, the Dunster investments in this area. I'm open to any questions.
Thanks, Christina. Is there any questions committee has? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through to Christine, just a quick one. We had a discussion this morning, Christine, about the water coming off the property to the south and going over the sidewalk. Is that something? This isn't, I don't totally related to this, but that's something that you look forward to dealing with the developer and the southern property, Mr. Abrams?
Mr. Chair, to Councillor O'Reilly and the committee, indeed, there is an operational challenge currently with the sidewalk on the south side of Holton. It is directly related to the large external drainage area to the south of Holton, and that is part of a current draft plan. It's the second phase of what we call the Morningside development, and the current owner, Mr. Ray Abraham, and his engineers, Engage Engineering, are currently underway to look at that design to divert as much of that flow as possible to the south. We have definitively stated that no flows can go from that particular subdivision, can continue to drain to Holton. So that sidewalk is fully functional when we don't have winter control issues.
Okay, any other questions? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Thank you for that. And I give you a motion that we receive the report and that it be sent on for approval and adoption to council.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Whoops. So that concludes today's meeting. If somebody would like to make a motion for adjournment. Mike Barkwell, seconded. Mayor Latham, all in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.